Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lurking for Legends, a live video cast where we talk with people from all walks of the publishing industry. I'm Christy Stratus, historical fantasy and historical suspense author, and my awesome co-hosts are epic fantasy author Richard H. Stevens and science fiction author David M. Kelly. So Lurking for Legends is an interactive broadcast, and we encourage viewers to chime in with questions for our guests or just comment on whatever you hear in the show. So tonight we're chatting with middle grade fantasy author and founder of the Writers' Happiness Movement, Lori Snyder. Welcome, Lori.
Welcome,
Thank
Lori.
you.
Hi, Lori.
Hi, everyone.
Great to have you. Yeah, it's great to have you. So let's just start out with you telling us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, as you say, I'm a writer. I write middle grade fantasy, and my debut just came out end of last year with HarperCollins called The Circus at the End of the Sea. And I've also been a freelance editor. I have a background in science and marine biology. I've done a lot of different careers, and I'm also the founder of something called the Writers' Happiness Movement, which is my way of building the world I want, basically, which is a world where all writers are supported. Anyone who wants to write has access to things that help them write, and not just things like tools on craft or those kinds of things, but more like things that give you both the physical and kind of the psychic space needed to write. So things like retreats for writers, and I teach yoga. I'm a longtime yoga teacher. I teach yoga for writers and do breath work and meditation for writers, and do both online and in-person pre-COVID retreats for writers, and writing salons where we all get together and talk about a certain writing topic. So it's a whole kind of breadth of things that are offered, as well as small little micro grants for writers.
That's fantastic. And of course, that sounds ideal to any writer. I mean, who is going to, who isn't going to want to participate in something like that? Writers' Happiness Movement, having the availability for these kinds of things. It just sounds amazing. So what inspired you to start that in the first place?
So that's a really great question. So from 2015 on, I've been leading retreats for writers in person. And the retreats the tagline was distraction-free writing with a yoga chaser. And I came up with these retreats because I had always led a lot of different kinds of retreats, yoga retreats, or back, I taught school for a while. I taught science and language arts, and I did family camps during the summer where I just brought pretty much every friend I knew that taught something cool, all kinds of workshops during this family camp. And I had been to a ton of retreats, I'd been to a ton of conferences, and I also for the last, I think 15, 18 years have taught yoga at the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators National Conference. So I realized as I was teaching the yoga at the conference that I really love teaching writers yoga, and I love bringing mindfulness and those kinds of traditions to writers, and those were my favorite yoga classes I taught all year. And I also realized that I'd been to so many classes and workshops and gone through so much school for writing. And I, like a lot of us, I had a full-time job and I have relationships, and I was trying to write in the evenings and weekends or whenever I had. And I thought, I don't really need another conference or class or a retreat where I learn more stuff. I need time. Like time is the precious commodity that I need. And so I thought, well, that's the kind of retreat I want to go on. So what if I build those? So I created a retreat that is basically a container for writing time. And so there's an opening and closing circle. There's a fabulous chef who cooks amazing foods to everyone's dietary needs. I offer yoga twice a day, level 1 and level 2. I offer guided meditations. There's a party one night, but that's the only structure to it. And as I was leading these and I was seeing the difference that it made, it was just 3 nights, 4 days. It wasn't super long, but that's hard for a lot of us to get away from that amount of time. That can be really challenging. And watching what people were able to do, and I don't mean what they were able to write and accomplish, but just the complete shift of mindset and demeanor in having this time that was this protected time for yourself, whether you ended up writing or you ended up sleeping or you ended up talking to other writers or going for hikes. But people were able to leave in a completely different state from how they arrived. And I started thinking, I really want this to be available to everyone and not just people who have the means to go on a retreat. So how do I make that happen? And that was the first impetus for Writers' Happiness Movement, was just how do I build something that removes any financial barrier to these kinds of experiences that help give us more space and time to create. And so that was where it started.
That's awesome. I'm just curious. You've really got my interest piqued right away. So where exactly are these retreats?
So where they were pre-COVID is in this really great little kind of foresty town outside of Los Angeles, about 3 hours outside of Los Angeles, where I live, called Idlewild. And Idlewild is this very kind of bizarre mix of people who want to live off the grid and just be completely not there. And they've also got these amazing science schools and performing arts schools and tons of artists who live there. So it's this real mix of kind of all different parts of the gamut of humans, basically. And it's alpine forest. It's not very populated. It gets crowded on the weekends. And so that's where they've been pre-COVID. I'm not sure where they're going to be coming back. Hopefully they'll still be there. But as Writers' Happiness Movement, because I launched Writers' Happiness Movement in February 2020, and we all know what happened in like late February, early March 2020. So all the things I had planned, which were more in-person things, all went online. And like all of us, I scrambled to learn how to do things online. So I've been leading retreats online, that kind of thing. And so now, instead of just having really a group of people that are mostly local to me in Los Angeles and California, and a few people who would fly in here and there, I have people all over the world that are doing Writers' Happiness Movement. So I have a little bit more leeway with where I do these retreats, as opposed to when I started and I thought, I just want to make it really easy for my local community, the people I already, am connected to. So it's a long answer to say I'm not really sure where they're going to end up. Hopefully, I'm hoping to start them up again next year. I haven't had them since the last one was in September of 2019.
No, that's fine. They sound wonderful. I've always thought about doing a retreat, and like you say, that they can be very cost prohibitive, and especially independent authors, our dollar, we're trying to make a stretch through editors and cover designers and putting food on our table. So it's difficult to go to these things as beneficial as they'd be. So I love the Writers' Happiness Movement. That's awesome. How long do these retreats usually take place? Is it for a weekend? Is it for a week? Or is it for 6 months?
Oh, soon. So I know, right? Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be amazing? We're all going to go to Hawaii for 6 months.
Awesome.
So right now, the ones in person have been 3 nights, 4 days, or 4 nights, 5 days.
Nice.
The ones I've been doing online have been 2 nights, 3 days. They've just been a Friday evening through Sunday lunch, because online doesn't work the same way. Although I will say, it is shocking how much you can create that sense of retreat and community online, even though people are in their own homes. It's kind of amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. My first novel took me over 17 years to write because I was working at the same time. And the times that I made the most kind of progress throughout that time was when I was on vacation. And after I'd had about 3 days of decompression and de-stressing, I was able to write. And then as soon as we got to within about 2 or 3 days of the vacation finishing, it's like it all started building back up again. And it was like, yeah, it's gone, So it's kind of like, it's very interesting. Like you say, I mean, we do need time to be able to actually do what it is that we want to and need to do in many cases.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really interesting about any creative or innovative work is that in order to do it, we need what looks to the rest of the world like time off. Like we need a ton of it. And but we're not paid for that time off. It's not actually time off. It's time that our minds have to sort of settle into that creative work and get out of the everyday, oh, this is how life has to go in order to create what we're creating. But it's really challenging for most of us to get that time off. Most of us don't have, a way to do that on a regular basis. So that's part of it too for me, is how do we create this sort of psychic space, time off, whatever it is for people, especially when they're at home, especially when we're doing it online and we're not traveling somewhere else, because traveling somewhere else does help, I will say.
Sure. Yeah. Different space, different environment.
Yeah.
With what you were saying, David, it's, you were reminding me so much. First of all, I totally get that. But second, you were reminding me of, I used to work in a corporation, and it was really, really fast paced in our department, very high stress, high pressure. And I can't remember this person's position. He was above a director level, but I just can't remember the position. And he used to always say that it would take a week for him to really decompress totally and de-stress. And then he could enjoy himself. And for a week he would be ramping back up, or something like that. It was either 2 weeks to de-stress, or it was a week down and a week up. And it was just, I remember even my, director, being, being very anxious about coming back when he would take time off, and like texting us and being like, how much work is there? Like, how many emails are waiting for me? This kind of stuff. So it's true. And it's so frustrating when I read like good advice, but difficult to follow, and I can't remember who said this. It's a famous author, but I just can't remember which one. She had said, make sure to always protect your writing time. You have to, you just have to always protect it. And sometimes that's just not doable. It's literally impossible. There just isn't a way. So, this whole idea of the writer's happiness movement and forcing that time in and everything is it really appeals for sure, especially to everyone who's been in that kind of high stress situation.
Yeah. And there's, and apropos to what you're both saying, there's this sense that when we do have even a little time to write, we better be at the computer getting words out. We better be there turning words out because our time is so precious. And it's really easy to forget or just disregard that sometimes that doesn't happen. And that doesn't mean that suddenly we're a terrible writer, we're a failure, we're never going to be able to do it again. It just means that we haven't allowed ourselves that sort of, a friend of mine calls it psychic space, and I keep coming back to this, a writer friend of mine. I think it's a really nice way to think of it. We haven't allowed ourselves that psychic space, but we can really beat ourselves up when we do something that's not at the computer getting the words out, when we know we have an hour right now that we better do this. And so to go on a retreat, the first thing I talk about at the opening circles, whether it's online or in person, the first thing I talk about is, please don't make this another place where you beat yourself up. That you might need to come here and you might be exhausted because let's face it, we're all kind of exhausted right now. This has been a really hard stretch of time. And most people are traumatized to a certain extent and exhausted. But even before this, that was true for a lot of us. And so you may need to just sleep. You may need to sit on a beautiful deck looking out at a forest with a book in your lap that you never pick up. And even though you may come on this retreat or sign up for the online ones with this idea that you're going to revise 4 chapters or you're going to start your next book or you're going to write your proposal, trust that you can let that go and do what your body needs right now and your heart needs right now, and trust that it'll make that come more easily. And what I see time and time again is, first of all, it's great because people take that to heart. They really do. They take it to heart and they're like, okay, I'm not going to push myself right now. And they might, for the first day and a half, they just chill out. They talk to the writers, they eat great food, they laugh, they go for walks, they sleep, they, get in the hot tub if they have a hot tub in their room. And then without fail, almost everybody ends up writing more than they expected, even though because they let themselves have this time. But it's really counterintuitive for a lot of us. We're very trained, just keep pushing, work harder, keep pushing, work harder. And you can certainly churn things out that way for sure. But there are a lot of times in the creative life, you need to just step away and work less hard and give yourself that space.
It's interesting, in Stephen King's on writing, he kind of mentions in there the idea that, writing isn't necessarily sitting down with a pen and paper, scribbling words or typing away on a keyboard. He says, if you're reading, you're writing. If you're editing, you're writing. If you're watching TV, you're writing. Because all of those things, all of these life experiences that we do, if you're hanging out with friends, all of those things go into what makes your writing yours. And so those things are actually vital. You can't shortcut them and say, well, I'm not going to do that because it's not productive, So it's kind of interesting that, we're kind of all talking about similar things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know I've said this before. I did the NaNoWriMo last November because I've never done it before. And I figured I want to get involved. So that's all you hear all November is NaNoWriMo this, NaNoWriMo that. I want to be part of that conversation. And I figured if I get 50,000 words out, if I do that 1 month, I can get my book out in 3 months because my books are pretty big. And it totally sucked the life right out of me. And I started that in November, and I am just finishing the edits for that book this week. That's how much life it sucked out of me. And it's amazing how long it's lingered. This book should have been done in April. I keep promising my fans it's going to be out in June. No, it'll be out in July. I'll definitely have it for Fan Expo in Toronto in August. And I still haven't got it done. And it's just by putting those expectations on yourself, it's amazing how it can just mentally affect you. And I didn't realize this until many, many months later. I look back and go, wow, I'll never do that again. It's amazing.
Yeah, I was thinking, just listening to Lori say, that we need this time to relax and to be calm and to just chill a little bit. is kind of an immediate relief. Just I feel like we need to hear that a lot, like not just once or twice, a lot. We don't believe it very often.
Just a comment here from Laura. Hi, Laura. Laura's retreats have been wonderful. At the beginning of the pandemic, so many of us felt lost, but meeting dozens of other writers in the same boat was supportive. It's a generous, loving community.
Thank you, Laura. It's great to see you here.
That's great praise. And it's funny because the pandemic too, you would think that being stuck at home, you would have so much time to write. You get so much more done. And I got so much less done, even though I was in front of my computer the whole day. Your mind is just, you don't even know it, but your mind has been taken so many different ways, especially with everything going on in the world, that you actually write less, and it's very peculiar. And then you beat yourself up again. That's how come I didn't get my 2,500 words out today? Well, I'll do 5,000 tomorrow, and then you don't do that, and it's just a losing cycle.
Yeah, it's really hard to let ourselves be human. It's just really, really hard. And it's like we all have different ways of approaching not letting ourselves be human, but they're all kind of the same thing. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, it's actually a lot with the writer's happiness movement. It's the concept that you already presented, but there's a lot behind it as well that's part of it. So tell us a little bit about, for example, we talked a little bit about the retreat. Maybe tell us a little bit about tiny grants for writers.
Sure. So to back up a little bit, one of my biggest challenges with the writer's happiness movement has been how to explain it. And when the idea first sort of dropped into me, I felt like, okay, this is what I've been trying to do my whole life, but I don't know how to explain it. Writing the copy for the website took me 8 months, and I hired editors to help me. I talked to a million people. And one of my friends I was talking to at one point said to me, well, the problem is that we need a new language for what you're explaining. And what's really great is as more and more people are sort of reimagining systems and the world, that language is happening now. That language is happening much more than it was even happening in 2019 when I wrote the copy for the website. And so the idea behind the writer's happiness movement is not just let's support writers. For me, I was thinking, okay, are systems in place to like support us and to bring happiness to us? They aren't doing that. They're just not doing it. And so in our culture, we say that we value things like innovation and creativity and art, but in truth, we only value those things when they're already famous. Like if somebody's already made it, we're like, hooray, we love this person's story of perseverance and their art is amazing. But the 25 years it took them to get there are not rewarded at all. And we all know that as writers. We're all working multiple jobs, trying to make things meet and trying to figure out how to plan time with the people we love while still writing and still bringing in enough income and all these things that we juggle. And in addition, there's still, even with some of the best systems we have in place, there's still this sense of scarcity, and there's still this sense of competition, and there's still this sense of it really depends on money. Like if we have the money, then this can happen. If we don't have the money, this can't happen. And I just don't like that. I don't want money to be the determining factor in who gets to do things and who has the time to write. And obviously I live in this world like we all do, and I understand that is how this world works, and I would like it to work differently. And so the idea behind writer's happiness was, what if I try to create a system that truly operates where kindness and art are the things that matter most? What does that look like? And how can I build that? And obviously you need money to make it happen. So how can that all work? And how can I build an economic structure that is ideally based on these same values and that is not based on things like greed or scarcity or all the things that we kind of have built into our economic systems? And so that took a little figuring out. I still don't know that I have it right, but it's getting there. And a piece of this was, I want to offer the things I can offer to people. I want to offer things like retreats, like yoga, like meditation, like salons, like community gatherings, workshops, those kinds of things. But I also want there to be a financial component. We need money to write. Sadly, we can't write unless we have some sort of way to support ourselves. And so because it's still new, the writer's happiness movement is still really new, I thought, okay, I personally can make sure I can do something small every month to help people out. I can do something really small. And ideally, the way writer's happiness movement is supported is that people who like the vision of it, who are able to and want to, can become a patron or drops a donation. I only have one official tier of patronage because I also have this vision of no hierarchy, even in the patronage. Like, what if everyone just pays $5 a month? And it's high enough that if we get a lot of people doing that, I can really build some amazing programs, but it's low enough that those of us who have means might not think that's too much to do. And so, and people can do more or less if they want, or they can do a one-time, $5 here, $10 there. But my vision is, if it can build to a place where we have 1,000 people every month at $5 a month, or 10,000 people, or 100,000, down the road, the goal is really 100,000 people at $5 a month, because I want the writer's happiness to be able to fund things like residencies, where writers can go for 2 to 4 weeks and have not only that paid for, but have all their expenses at home paid for, have a huge stipend so they're covered and they don't have to worry about it. And I want to build retirement homes, because how many of us really have a whole lot of retirement put away unless we have a day job that does that for us. And so there's these big programs that I want to fund. But in the meantime, and I want to fund bigger grants also. I really have this, since I was young, I'm like, I want to do Macarthur Genius style grants. I want to be able to give that kind of money to people with no strings attached and just be like, here, go do your amazing thing. And so obviously I can't do that yet. There's about 70 patrons right now of Writers Happiness. There's not a lot, but I'm so grateful for the ones who are there, and they are mighty. They're loyal and mighty. And so right now there are what I call micro grants or tiny grants that are really just these little cash awards that are meant to sort of cheer a writer on and say, you're not alone, you're doing great, keep going. It's $25 cash, it's not a lot. And it comes in this beautiful art card that an artist friend of mine, Lisa Acapinti, designed for me. So it explains what the Writers Happiness Movement is. It explains what this little micro grant is, that it's just a little like, good for you, you're doing great. And the way people get it is someone they know nominates them. So there's a place on the website, those of you who have writer friends who are watching this, there's a place on the website where you nominate a writer you know who you think is great. And the only requirements are they're a writer. They don't have to be published. They don't have to have anything else, but they are a writer. They think of themselves as a writer, or they write things. And number two, that the person nominating them thinks they're a great human. And there's a little place where the person nominating explains why they think this person is fabulous. And if that person is one of the 2 people a month chosen for these micro grants, they're $25 twice, 2 of them a month go out. I edit it down so there's nothing personal in there or nothing that doesn't belong, but I edit down the explanation of the friend why they think this person is amazing, and I include that in the micro grant. So it's this little micro grant, it's a little note from me in Writers Happiness, and it's a note from a friend of yours who thinks you're amazing and nominated you for the grant, saying why they think you should get this grant. And so it's one of my favorite things to do every month. I love just like picking the people and stuffing the envelopes and getting them out. And it's a little thing. And as the patronage grows, those will grow as well.
Wow, that's awesome.
It really is. I know that on your website you also have yoga for writers. Now I know there's I think what's on your website, I'm not sure if it's 2 examples of yoga for writers, but I have to say this is not something I really thought about. I've thought about meditation for writers. I haven't seen it in a whole lot of places, specifically for writers. It's always creativity in general, which is fine, but for writers, wow, and then to think yoga for writers, that is really cool. So is that something that you came up with, or what is it exactly?
I think a lot of people who teach yoga and are writers do yoga for writers of some sort, but this is, for me, like I said, I've been teaching yoga in person at the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators conference for 18 years, and I've been teaching yoga for almost 20 now. And one of the main things I always thought I would do with Writers Happiness Movement, and that I do at my retreats, is offer yoga for writers. So I had planned to do it in person, and started here in LA, but again, COVID hit. And so I took all my other yoga teaching online. I learned how to do that online. And so I started doing twice a week for half an hour each time. They're short, it's 30 minutes. One of them is just a 30-minute gentle yoga class for writers. It's any level, you don't need a mat or experience. The other one is 10 minutes of breath work, 10 minutes of gentle yoga, 10 minutes of guided meditation for writers. And those have been happening twice a week since April of 2020. What I will say is, just starting about a month and a half ago, I ended up with this brutal case of sciatica and I can't practice yoga or teach right now. And so that is on hiatus probably through the end of the year. I probably won't be able to come back to it. So what's on the website right now, there are 2 classes on the website because I haven't been putting the classes up anywhere. I started recording them at some point, but my camera wasn't great, so the quality is not great. I'm sort of a fan of these ephemeral things, like you teach it and then they're done. But obviously we don't live in that world right now, which is also fine. And so I started recording them every week, and then I would just put the last week's one up on my website. And so what's up there right now are the last 2 classes I taught before I was injured. And I have all the other ones. I'm in the process of getting them up on a Vimeo or someplace so people can practice for them. But there actually is a method behind just having the latest 2 up as well, is that I know for me, if I go to a meditation site or a yoga site of a teacher I like, and they have hundreds of classes, it takes me so long to figure out what class I should be doing or what meditation I should be listening to. And that always felt honestly a little stressful because it's one more decision to make in a land where I personally, like I own my own businesses, I make way too many decisions every day and I have decision fatigue, and I kind of want someone to say, here's your class, and I just do it. And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take that decision piece out of it, and I'm just going to put up, here's your class. It's up for a week, and then I replace it with the next class. And I really love something about that. There's something really clean and sweet and just easy about being like, well, here's this week's class, and then there's a new one next week. So that's just a long way to say that the ones that are up there are my most recent 2. If anybody goes to check them out, I apologize. My camera is not great. It's a little blurry, but you should still be able to see me okay. And when I come back to things, or sometime in between now and then, I'll get all the other ones up somewhere. So people who want all the previous ones, there's quite a few of them now.
It's interesting about, yoga because, as writers, we tend to be quite static individuals. Yeah. And, obviously that can be kind of like physically quite debilitating in the long run. And for instance, my wife, she's always trying to get me into doing yoga, but I have a problem with my foot, which means that a lot of yoga I can't kind of like really do. And she actually found a couple of videos on something called chair yoga, where you actually do yoga mostly kind of like sat in a chair and using the chair for support. And they're relatively quick, about 20 minutes, but it does at least get you kind of like moving and breathing and so on. And that's actually been like, quite good. It's like, and even with my kind of like personal kind of like challenges with regards to, as I said, my foot, it's like I could still at least achieve it, and some of it still hurts in actual fact. But it's amazing that there are these resources available to you. So I mean, you don't have to just be, this kind of like writer hunched over a keyboard and like not doing anything. It's like, you need to look after yourself just as much as you need to look after your business as a writer.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Catherine, for that little comment there that popped up. Chair yoga is fantastic, and it's great for writers because if you're doing the thing where you're, thanks, Laura, see you later. If you're doing the thing where you're like, you're going to write for a little bit and then you're going to take a break, or the Pomodoro method or anything like that some people do, you can just stay in your chair and you can do things. Because, Christy, to your question, yoga for writers is really like a lot of shoulder opening and a lot of hip opening and a lot of like back things that counteract the kind of computer hunch that we get into, and just neck things because we're really focused straight ahead on things, and it's that, and then I weave in things about being a writer, and there are things specific to writers who, like some of the things we've talked about already in the show, and the ways that our minds may work, or the ways that our particular body stiffness happens, and so I sometimes weave a lot of that stuff through also.
So I think that's awesome. I just so how can someone actually get involved in the writers movement? Obviously, you can go to the writers movement link on your website and sign up. What else do they need to do, or is that it? And we just go from there.
That's it. I mean, if you go to the writershappiness.com and you join it, you'll get a little pop-up with like different, what are your interests, because there's yoga and some people don't care about that. And there's retreats and there's salons and there's workshops and there's the microgrants. And so checking what emails you want to get. And that's all that you need to do. And that's very purposeful because again, time is precious to us. And so while I want to build a community, I want it to be really clear that this is not a community where we all come together as writers and everyone works to make the community happen. It's a community where we all come together and I'm curating the stuff and making it happen and you are part of it. And it's not additional time. It's meant to support you as writers. It's not meant to give you one more thing to do. And so, and that's also, if you do join, just make sure that you do check which things you want, because there are a lot of things that are offered through the Writers' Happiness Movement. There are a fair amount of emails that go out. And if you don't want them all, we all know how annoying that can be. Just make sure you check the ones you do want.
Yeah, no, I find it amazing that sometimes to get more writing done, you need to do more things, and this seems counterproductive. But you just cut certain things out of your life and put other things in, and that actually gets you going quicker into what you do. I used to get in the rabbit hole of just spending so much time on different author groups, which you think would be helpful, but it's just a very unproductive time, and it's most of it, with no offense to any of the authors that are in them, it's mostly just dribble. And, you just, all of a sudden, next thing you know, the morning's gone. You go, what did I do? Like, I write full time and I've done nothing all morning. What was the point of me even sitting in front of my computer? So there's obviously there's certain ways to get into it. And I like the idea of the yoga because if I'm stuck for writing a scene, a lot of times if I go for a walk or if I have a shower and I'm by myself and there's no outside pressures, all of a sudden, all these scenes jump into my head, and geez, I know what to write, and I can just do it. I can't dry off quick enough to get back in front of the computer to write it. So I could imagine yoga would be exactly the same thing.
TMI, Richard. TMI.
What's that?
TMI, Richard.
I'm not trying to create a visual. I'm just, but it's so true. If you don't have anything outside pressures on you, and your mind's just free to wander, all of a sudden the scenes just start jumping in your head again. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'll tell you, that's for me. I mean, meditation is not easy for me in general because sitting still and like clearing my mind is not easy, which is another thing I think that is really common to most writers. Not the sitting still part, that's specific to me, but the clearing the mind, because we live in lives that, like, we live in our minds. Like, our work is a life of the mind. And so, but one of the things that's always most challenging, Richard, apropos to that, is that the moment I sit down in meditation, if I have a project going, all of a sudden all the ideas start happening. And I'm like, oh, do I sit still and breathe, or do I go write them down? And some people say, oh, you can trust you'll remember them if they're meant to be. And I'm like, no, I can't. No. I learned that one the hard way. I'm like, for sure I'll remember this brilliant idea. No. So it is challenging. And I often suggest to people in yoga that just keep a pad of paper next to you and a pen. Yeah. So if things do happen, because when we put ourselves into those states of, again, not thinking about the specific thing, but also yoga is by nature designed to open up the body. It's, if you look at it from the perspective of the yogic tradition and like how ancient yogis viewed the body, they believe that it's opening up all the energy channels in the body. And those are not separate from our thoughts and our mind and where our mind goes. So like opening the flow of creativity is one of the things that can happen. And especially in the quieter moments, it's really common for scenes, ideas, solutions, brand new shiny ideas to come to you.
Oh, absolutely. I used to, it'd be about 25-minute drive to work. It'd be time to shut off family life and everything else, and you're on your way to work. And as long as the traffic didn't annoy you, you're in your own world listening to music. And I would have these amazing ideas. And they were so incredible that there was no way in the world that I would ever forget this idea. It's so amazing. But as soon as I got to work, it was gone. And, I'd be driving home thinking, what the heck was I thinking about? And it would not come back. As great as that idea was, I could never find it again. So you definitely need to find some way to write it down. So I like that. Write it down during yoga. That'd be amazing.
I used to use a little digital mini recorder, and I used to keep that with me everywhere I went. And if I had an idea, I would just talk into this thing. And then the trouble with that I found was that when I came back to listen to it, I couldn't understand what the hell I was saying.
Yeah, I do that on my phone all the time when I'm driving, because driving for me also is one of my favorite places for ideas. And I do it on my phone, but then I get home and I have 40 12-second recordings on my phone I have to listen to or transcribe. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So true. So tell us also a little bit about your writing. You have a book that came out, it was traditionally published, that was called The Circus at the End of the Sea. And I think that you said
I
that
love
this
the
is
title.
also kind of connected. Everything is kind of connected. Yeah.
Everything is kind of connected. So this book is my love letter to Venice, California, which is one of the great loves of my life. And it's also a book that is really interwoven with yoga philosophy and the way I see the world, which made it challenging to write because it's a fantasy, but there's no real villain in it. There's no real bad guy in it, which is, you know, a lot of you write fantasy. It's challenging to do with a fantasy and not have sort of a bad guy like that. And the philosophy in it is very much sort of non-duality and seeing all sides of things and seeing things for what they really are. And a lot of the things that come from, I think, my study of the yoga traditions. And I started writing this book well before the idea of the writer's happiness movement came to me. But one of the things, I've always been really fascinated with happiness science and happiness study, which is a relatively new field. But before that, there was, you know, study of the brain and neuroscience and those kinds of things that I also think are really fascinating. And as I was writing this book, the first thing I had written, this is not my first book I wrote. I always wanted to go the traditionally published route, partly because I write for kids, and it's much harder to get books out through those gatekeepers if you're not traditionally published than it is if you're self-published. But I knew that was the route for me that I wanted to go, and this is not my first book that I tried with. This is about my third book that I tried with. And when I started writing this one, I have my whole long, giant rolls of rejections. I thought, you know what, I'm just not going to write anything that doesn't delight me. This book is going to be about delight. For me, for the reader, it's going to be about delight. That's how I see Venice. I find it incredibly delightful. And in writing a book that way, it was really fun. Because if I started like go off into a scene, I'm like, yeah, this isn't delightful to me. It was gone. And it was a really specific goal. It wasn't just, does it make sense for the book? Is it fun to write? Am I enjoying it? It was like delight. It was very specific. And that's a different thing than just enjoying or smart or make sense. And so I really noticed in writing this book how much better I tend to write when I'm in a certain state of mind. And that state of mind for me is connected to myself, whatever that means. It's like when I'm really connected to myself and who I most truly am in that moment, I write much better than if I'm trying to do something that I'm not feeling at the moment, which is different from waiting for inspiration to strike for me. It's that sense of like dropping deeply into who you are and what you're trying to say in the thing you're writing, because every book, every story is different and requires a different piece of you to come through it. And so I really noticed how much this impacted my writing and how much more like me my writing was. And I knew as I was writing this book that this was the book that would get picked up. I will say it took 3 years to sell, so it was not a fast thing. but I knew as I was writing it, I'm like, this is the one that is that I can. Number one, I've practiced enough with the craft that I can write the book I want to write. But number two, it's connected enough to me, and I know that it's flowing right. And so that was kind of the beginning of me looking at, what do I need to be creative, and what does it mean to me to drop into those spaces, and what can I offer that will help other writers do that? And not just writers who are able to afford to go away and treat themselves to things like a retreat, but a writer who is in a part of the country where they don't have access to anything like this, or they don't have any writer friends. Like how can I start bringing that out in a way that helps other people?
I'm curious, so what came first? Was it the yoga or the writing? And did one spur the other on?
So the writing came first. I wasn't someone who always knew I wanted to be a writer. I didn't think about, I always wrote, and I started 1 million novels when I was young and in school, and I have like, the books that I hand bound when I was in elementary school, but it never occurred to me, I of course wrote poetry because, what teen doesn't write poetry, but it never occurred to me to be a writer. And then in my late 20s, I started thinking, I think I really want to do this. But it was interesting too, because I really wasn't sure that I had the temperament, meaning I didn't know very many people who did creative work, but the ones I did know tended to be much sort of darker in mood than I was, and much more focused and much more obsessive. And I was kind of none of those things. And I thought, I don't know, do I have anything to say? Can I be a writer? And it sounds silly to say now, but I really thought that. And so I went to the local bookstore on the boardwalk in Venice. I bought a couple books on how writers write. I went home and I read them all. And I was like, okay, good. There are all kinds of writers writing in all kinds of ways. So I guess I could do this. And so I started writing then. I had been practicing yoga through this whole time, but I was really a dancer. And I was in LA in the 90s. I was a dancer. I mean, not professionally. I did do some stuff, but mainly not professionally. And all my dance friends, because yoga got really big here before it got big anywhere else, really, all my dance friends were like, oh, you have to try yoga. Yoga's so great. And I thought, that's like sitting still. Why would I do that? That sounds terrible. And for 2 years, everyone was like, oh, Laura, you have to try yoga. And I was like, no, thank you. And I don't even know what shifted in me. But one day I thought, I think that would be good for me. I should learn how to sit still. That would be really helpful. And so I started going to yoga classes. Actually, now that I think about it, it's pretty similar in time frame. I probably started going to yoga in my early 20s, realistically. And I started writing seriously in my late 20s, but I was still writing through that time. I don't know how to answer that question clearly. All intertwined.
No, that's fine. It sounds like one did actually benefit the other.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome.
I don't think I could have written with any kind of commitment. I'm very, very like kinetic. I move, like just physically, I like to move. And I don't think I could sit still enough to write at a computer or even in a paper if I didn't also have something really physical I was doing. So I think they did it very much in that way, play into each other.
Absolutely. So yoga grounds you and then you can write. So thank you for coming on. And before we let you go, what's next with Laurie Snyder? Is there a sequel to The End of the Sea there, or what's happening?
So there's not a sequel, but there is a second book coming out with HarperCollins that I'm in revisions for right now. That is not coming out till 2024. It is another middle grade fantasy, and the working title is The Time Garden, but I have since learned that belonged to another book, very famous book in the 50s. So I'm not sure if we're going to use it or not, but I'm working on that. And then in terms of Writer's Happiness Movement, partly because of the injury I have and not being able to do the yoga or sit very long, I'm just back to being able to sit and do these kinds of things. The Writer's Happiness Movement, just so people know, is actually on sabbatical right now, and it will be coming back, as soon as I'm able to come back, which will realistically be a couple months. So if you do sign up, you'll get an email with all the info, but you'll also get a note saying, hey, we're on sabbatical right now, but we'll be back as soon as we're back.
And I know Christy's got the banner scrolling at the bottom of our screen there, but where else can we find your books?
So the Circus at the End of the Sea is any place you buy books. It's wherever you go in. If you have a local independent bookstore, I'm always a fan of that. So that's my favorite. And if they don't have it, you can request it, and that's great for me. And anywhere else you buy books online, bookshop.org is a great place. There's links on my website to other places you can buy it as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for sharing your story with us, especially with the Writer's Happiness Movement. That sounds like a great movement that I think I might sign up for and look forward to when you come off your sabbatical. I think that would be great. It's always nice to hang around with like-minded authors because, the rest of the world just doesn't get us. So it's nice. Yeah, absolutely. So before we leave, Christy, what's new with you?
Oh, it's the same thing that's always new with me. So there's a new episode of Corrupted Magic up on Kindle Vella. So I think we're up to episode 6 now. Thank you.
Wow.
Keeping up, yeah. So I've been able to keep up with an episode a week. And the latest one is up. It's on my Patreon, and it is also on Kindle Vella. So you can check it out either way. It is gaining some steam now. So that's always exciting. And, I'm working on just the next episodes. I think I'm up to writing episode 12 at the moment. So staying ahead of it. So that's really what I work on mostly with my writing at the moment. A lot of my creativity goes there and to the research it takes to write it. So yeah, that is what's up. How about with you, David?
As I mentioned offline, I've been a little bit in a bad place the last kind of week, but I'm still writing, and I'm currently sitting on 17,000 words in the second of the Hyperion Jones books.
Nice.
So still motoring along. It's just other things bothering me. So it happens. What about you, Richard?
No, that's great. like I said offline as well, as I'm struggling to get Windwalker finally edited. I've just been having so many things going on outside of the actual writing. So I was at the Fan Expo, as a guest author Fan Expo in Toronto this last weekend. It was a 4-day event, but it actually took us 5 days, so we had to set up the day before, and it's just chewing into my editing time. And so what did I do while we were in Toronto? We had this weekend coming up off. I saw something, a medieval fair, about 2.5 hours away from us this long weekend. I thought, oh, we should sign up for that. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be leaving like 5 o'clock on Friday morning to get through Toronto. We'll be up in Hastings, which is, if anyone's from Ontario, Canada, it's up around Peterborough. And it looks like an amazing medieval fair. So I generally rock medieval fairs because that's my genre, that's my crowd. So I'm looking forward to meeting all the people and selling and signing a few books. But so Windwalker should be done editing this week. I hope, maybe not. But my goal is to have it actually printed by mid-September for the Royal Medieval Fair in Waterloo. But we'll see. I keep promising my fans that, and I hate to let them down. We'll see if my printer's on board with it. But that's really what's new with me right now. So again, thanks, Lori, for coming on. Next week on Looking for Legends, we'll be featuring our monthly live read. Yay. We love doing live reads. Christy, Dave, and I look forward to these episodes, especially this one, as I get to meet Dave's mother. And I think I'm going to be Dave's lover as well. So interesting how that plays out. So,
yeah, I'm not too happy with this.
So Dave might not even attend this one. We'll see. He might be grounded, actually. So. And so no TV for Dave and your chores. I might even have to break out the good old cook spoon for you, Dave. We'll see. So be sure to tune in next week as we read excerpts from talented historical romance author Hildy McQueen, science fiction author Warren Shepard, and a little-known epic fantasy author Richard H. Stevens. We're actually going to do another excerpt out of Windwalker, so I look forward to doing that. And I will make sure that I find some great role for you, Dave. Don't worry.
Oh, thank you so much.
So, thanks again, Lori, for coming on. We appreciate you being here. It was great hearing about your stuff, and I hope that a lot of authors will hook up with your Writers' Happiness movement. So until we meet again, take good care.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.